In this episode, I'm joined by Justin Tedesco, Vice President of Pre-Engineered Metal Buildings at Tedesco Construction. We talked about his journey from growing up in a third-generation family business to navigating an acquisition and what it takes to balance tradition with innovation in construction. Justin shares lessons on leadership, scaling smart, and why mindset matters more than background when it comes to building teams. Let's get into it. So Justin, thank you very much for joining us on a CPC.
Thanks for having me here today. Appreciate it.
No, it's great to have you on and certainly kind of dive into some questions about your background. I think it's, we have a variety of different guests on. So, having a third generation leader, someone that's been in the game for a long while is always of interest. And I'm sure people will find your story of real interest. So we'll sort of dive straight into the questions, if that's okay.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So, as I mentioned, you're a third generation leader in the business. What was it like growing up around construction, and when did you realize that it was going to be the path for you?
Looking back, as far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be in the construction industry. My father and grandfather were in the business since 1973, so I have a lot of memories as a child. Just my mother, my grandmother dropping me off to go visit them on job sites. I got a lot of memories just driving around in the car with them where they would point out, different projects that they worked on in town. And, I always noticed that they had, deep sense of pride in what they did. And that, I always just was interested in what they were doing in the business. I will say that they tried to keep me out of the business. As parents do, you kind of always aspire that your kids will do for your kids to do more than you did. So they wanted me to do something different, but I always knew I wanted to get into the business. I went to school for finance and did a little bit of that right out of college, but quickly kind of pushed my way into the family business. In 2009, I joined the company full time. So there are a lot of fun memories. I'm sorry, say that again.
Wasn't taking no for an answer from your father.
No, but a lot of fun memories from growing up as a kid. You get to see your dad and grandfather in a different light when they're in business. Just hearing some of the conversations they had, it was eye opening, and it interested me, to say the least.
I was going to say, you get to see behind the curtain, and you mentioned there that you started. Was it 2009? You said that you you went in as an APM. Obviously learned the business, working under your father and your grandfather. What did the early days kind of teach you about the business and yourself, really?
Yeah. So when I came into the business, it was still a very small business. So there was no training program, right? It was just you showed up the first day and you kind of rode shotgun for a while. So rode shotgun with my father for a long time. Learned kind of how he interacted with people, how he dealt with clients, how he dealt with subcontractors, and really just kind of learned the business from being on site and just in the room with him. One of the things that I remember from very early on that him and my grandfather both wanted to instill in me is that in business, all we have is our reputation and our integrity. Like that was drilled into me from the first days that I started there with the company. So there was a deep emphasis on that, an emphasis on, do what you say you're going to do, and really make sure that your clients are happy. That was the most important thing that they tried to instill in me. So learned a lot very early on, just kind of by trial by fire. I was thrown into a position, even as an APM, where I was given more responsibility than I probably should have been given in the early days. And I will say, even though they were very, when you're working in a family business, it can be difficult. They're very, family can be very critical. They did give me a lot of latitude to do what I needed to do, to make mistakes and to learn from them. So that was important. That was like what the early years kind of looked like. One thing that kind of surprised me when I got into the business is that I learned quickly that I actually liked the sales side of the business. growing up, I was kind of an analytical guy. I still am, very analytical, um, somewhat of an introvert. Uh, you know, teachers used to tell my parents I was kind of a man of few words. So if you would have told 16-year-old me that I would grow up to really love being in, on the sales side of the business, I would have told you were crazy. But I learned that early on because I learned that, there was more to selling than maybe what I thought selling was all about. And learning how my father and grandfather kind of did it in a consultative way, and the way they dealt with clients, I grew to love it.
Well, like you say, I think, the odd thing about sales is you, in the early days, I was the same. You think it's very much about, talking, when in
Yeah,
fact it's actually about listening. Um,
100%.
and it's strange that, that misconception that I think a lot of people had. I had the same thing, that you had to be the loudest person in the room, and the person that's kind of, this very slick kind of dressed person. But it's not
Yeah.
about that. It's very much, like you say, it's about relationships and really understanding what your clients really want from you.
Mhm.
And that will kind of help to shape it. So a question I had, because I noticed that in 2021, I think the business was acquired by Montante.
Mhm.
Is that right?
Yep.
Am I saying it right?
Yeah, Montante Construction. So, 2021, Montante Construction acquired our company. We still operate as a division of Montante Construction as Tedesco Construction Services. So we're still kind of our own entity there. Um, so leading up to that, uh, as I mentioned before, I joined the business in 2009. My grandfather was kind of phasing himself out of the business at that point. My father was really taking over, and from 2009 until, about 2020, right before COVID, we had grown the business quite a bit, and I'd done that alongside my father. And I knew that that wasn't it. Like, I knew that we wanted to grow further. And one of the things I realized is that to do that, I was going to need a partner to do that with. Um, because we were still, even though we had grown, we were still a small business. And, we were handling everything from, estimating, project management, project supervision, but we were also handling all the HR, all the accounting, all the insurance requirements that we needed to have in place. I used to actually physically write the checks for accounts payables. I did accounts payables and I wrote the checks that we sent out to vendors. So that side of the business took a lot of time away from us, away from working really with clients. Um, so I realized I needed to find a partner. I had worked with the folks at Montante for years. The president of Montante Construction, Doug Elia, I worked with him, for over 10 years before we came over here. He previously worked for LP Simonelli, and we did a few projects together over there. And then when he came over and started running Montante Construction, we did a few projects together. Always really admired him, somebody I looked up to in the industry, and thought that he could be a person that maybe we could partner with. So when we came over, they took all that back office stuff off my plate. So they handle all the HR, they handle accounting, insurance, all that stuff now. So it really allowed me the ability to focus just strictly on clients, strictly on you know working with the clients we had, delivering exceptional projects for them, and also finding new clients. So that's really what I've been able to focus on since I came over here in 2021. And, it's allowed us to grow further. I feel like we're just kind of getting our footing in that regard. The early days when I came over, I had a lot to learn from them about how they did things. They had to learn more about my business. So it took a little while to get integrated, the two companies to integrate together. But now we're really at a point where we've grown and we're looking to grow even further.
Well, acquisition's always difficult, right? I think, oddly enough, we've just gone through the same thing. We've just been
Okay.
acquired by a larger business literally 3, 4 days ago. The deal was complete, and it's a complex situation if you've never gone through that process before, right? And it's sluggish sometimes, and then it's quick, and then it's slow, and then it's difficult. It is a difficult process. So something you can kind of help me with. What kind of what would you say was the kind of early learning curves that you went through, working with a business that's acquired your business? What was the kind of early learning that you, if you look back now, you would say, I wish I would have known that before?
Um, I think one key thing was realize that there's there's a lot of different ways to do things, and your way, although your family or your business may have been doing it for 30 or 40 years, it doesn't necessarily mean it was the right way to do things. So it was going in with an open mind. I think that was the most important thing, was going in really with an open mind, and looking to learn, and having that humility to really understand that, look, we don't know everything. We definitely don't know everything. So being open to that was important. And I'll say that the thing that really has carried us through, and I've talked to other folks that are looking at either selling their business, or somebody's looking to acquire their business and acquire another business. And I always say the most important thing is really the people, and like the core values of the companies, because that's really what's going to kind of carry you through. You're going to have hiccups where, like, some of the ways that I do things and some of the ways that I interact with clients may be different than the way Montante Construction does, and vice versa. And sometimes you have differences, and you may even have disagreements about that. Um, but you work through it, and the people and the core values of the companies are the most important thing. If those things are in place and aligned, then you can kind of weather the storm um, of dealing with differences when bringing two businesses together.
I'm glad you said that, because it was the one thing for me that, naturally in the industry we're in, we get approached by M&A people all the time, and people looking to acquire businesses, or within the recruitment space. And I think the one thing that stood out different for the partner that we've worked with, ASAP, is that their values were the same as ours, very much aligned. The CEO, his kind of general culture and the way that he is, his thoughts for the business, very much aligned with ours. I mean, they're bigger than us, so of course they've got the firepower to help us to drive, what we wanted. And very similar to yourself, that my business partner's retiring in about 18 months, and I sat there thinking to myself, what am I going to do when he goes? Because you lose all that experience and that knowledge and that
Mhm.
sounding board, right? And you need that partnership to be able to kind of drive it. Um, what was the kind of, I guess, the long term kind of the long term vision that you had for the business? Was it more that they had the financial power, or was it more the fact that they were able to kind of help you to get over that step where you wanted to take the business, and felt that
Yeah.
they were a partner to kind of drive you?
I'd say it's both, honestly. I mean, so Montante Construction is part of a larger group of companies, Montante Group, which owns TM Montante Development and Montante Solar. So they're kind of a big operating company here in town, very financially stable. And so there was the financial aspect of it. They were willing to make an investment in our business, and still are doing so. So that was one aspect of it. But also just being able to tap into the resources they had for, shared services for things like accounting, HR, and all that stuff. Really taking that off my plate. That was a lot of it too. So it was really the financial backing that they provided, as well as just being able to allow me to get rid of all that stuff and just focus on projects and clients.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. I think I wanted to touch on something, because when you said earlier, you're very much an introvert and you've gone into sales. There'll
Mhm.
be a lot of people that are listening to this that, younger generation, and the whole point of this podcast is very much to inspire the next generation of leadership,
Mhm.
right? What would you say to those people who are sitting there and they feel that they're introverted people, and probably have those anxieties or those concerns to actually kind of put themselves out there to be in those
Mhm.
positions? What would be a bit of advice that you'd give to those people?
Well, I think the first thing would be that everybody has those anxieties. I mean, that's something that I didn't realize as much as an introvert growing up. That even the people that seemed extroverted, everybody has anxieties about, some social anxieties. Everybody has that to a certain extent. There's really not anybody out there that is completely untouched by any type of nerves or anxiety when they're, maybe public speaking, for example. Most people have a little bit of something, a little bit of butterflies, no matter what. So realizing that that's normal and that's part of the process, that's part of it. The other thing is, it's just get out there and experience more things. The type of sales we do, I enjoy, but there's other types of sales that I wouldn't enjoy. So maybe it's tasting those different, those different opportunities, seeing what's really out there. And if you're interested in something, just kind of go deep and really try to understand it. But it's understanding that there's a lot of different things out there, a lot of different avenues you can go. And even if you feel that you're introverted, maybe you haven't found something you like to talk about yet. That could be part of it as well.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think that's it. It's the passion, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's completely, and I think that's key. I think if I was to be able to tell my 21-year-old self something coming out of university was, find something that you have passion in, because as the saying goes, you never work a day in your life when you do something that you love.
Yeah.
Um, and, and and kind of touching on to that point, was there like a eureka moment for you, or was there like a fly going around? Was there a particular an event or anything that you can recall that was that moment where you felt that, I don't say you kind of got over those anxieties, but you realized that as an introvert, you could push yourself. Like you say, you talked about public speaking. Did you
Mhm.
get thrown into the deep end somewhere or something along those lines that put you out?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of threw myself into the deep end a little bit. I joined a lot of local programs like leadership programs and things like that locally where you were kind of required to go. Part of it was going and speaking in front of groups. Maybe they weren't large groups. You weren't speaking in front of hundreds or thousands of people, but even as an introvert early on, like speaking in front of a room of 20 of my peers would give me anxiety. So just doing that more, that was important. I would say even, I always did it when we ran our own business, where we would put on, whether it's lunch and learns or whatever, for architects, engineers in the industry, to get them to learn a little bit more about pre-engineered metal buildings. But even when I came over here, I gained more confidence. When Montante acquired our company, I gained more confidence because I was put in a position where I had to do more of that speaking. I was speaking at town halls here for the company. They pushed me to do more lunch and learns and get out there and do more presentations. And it's just something that uh, I think over time, it's like anything else. The more you do it, the more comfortable you get doing it. There's still nerves every time, but I would say even in the last like 2 years, I felt like, okay, I can feel those nerves, but I know that I've delivered in the past, so I know I could do it again. So I think there wasn't really one specific like moment, but it was just not shying away from the opportunity to get out there and speak.
I think you're completely right there. I think it's about kind of putting yourself out there, because I think in life, if you don't test yourself in any capacity, you're never going to know whether you can, right? And I think it's about. I remember the first podcast that we did when we was talking about kind of doing one. I've been in recruitment and construction for sort of 16, 17 years or whatever it is, and we spoke about it. We said, well, it'd be a great idea to get leaders on and pass it. I remember the first one. I sat here just absolutely sweating, and
Mhm.
I speak to clients all day long on video calls. You're pitching to clients of 3-4 billion dollars, and trying to get their business. But all
Yeah.
of a sudden, you speak to someone on a one-to-one conversation, and I was sitting there shitting a brick. To be honest, I was I
Yeah.
was a bit nervous,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
it's such a strange thing when all you're doing is asking somebody questions that
Yeah.
about their life and about their story. It's a strange one, but I think getting back to your point is putting yourself out there and testing yourself. I think that's
Yeah.
certainly it. Something that you guys have obviously built a really good reputation, right, in the pre-engineered space.
Mhm.
Um, what's the value proposition of the kind of pre-engineered metal like business right now? What is the and what's the demand for it against kind of traditional construction?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of features and benefits and reasons people use pre-engineered metal buildings. I always talk about like three key things that are reasons why people use a pre-engineered metal building. First is really price. They're more cost effective. And I'll get into a little bit about why that is. Second is speed. They're faster to put up. And third is they can be a single source provider or a single source solution. So why are they less expensive? They're less expensive because pre-engineered metal buildings look at the entire building assembly and design it as an integrated system, where in doing so, they're able to engineer parts of the building to be as efficient as possible. So what does that really mean? It really means that you design it with less steel. right? So you take more steel out of the project, you take tonnage of steel out of the project, the cost goes down. So pre-engineered metal buildings are really about being as efficient as possible with the design and materials. And they could save versus conventional construction, they can save 30%. That's very common. They could save 30% versus conventional construction methods. In terms of speed, they're much faster to erect in the field. And the reason that is that everything comes to the site ready to assemble it. So everything's cut to length. Bolts bolt holes are punched, holes are punched. Everything is ready to assemble. It's essentially like a big erector set when you get it on site. So you can speed up the construction, and it's 25-30% faster than conventional construction methods. So cost is always a big one, and speed is another big one. A third one that I mentioned already that folks don't talk about as much is just the fact that they are a single source solution. And what that means is, in conventional construction methods, you have somebody that constructs the building framing, the structural steel, let's say. You have one contractor doing that. Then you have another contractor coming in that's going to do the roof on the building. And then you'll have a third contractor at a minimum that's going to do the facade of the building, the facade of the building structure. So you got 3 different contractors there, and there's usually more involved than that. Whereas with a pre-engineered metal building system, you have the framing system, the roof covering, which is typically a metal roof system, standing seam metal roof, and then a wall system, whether that's a single skin traditional metal wall panel or an insulated metal wall panel. That's all provided by one contractor and one provider. So there's it's a single source, single responsibility, and it streamlines things, and it makes the project go a little bit smoother. So those are like the 3 things that I think of that stand out the most as a value proposition for pre-engineered metal buildings. In terms of how the market has kind of changed over the years, when my father and especially my grandfather got into the business, they were used much more for agricultural and really industrial applications. They were a little bit simpler back then, whereas now we use them for all different types of construction. We use them for industrial and agricultural all the time as well. Still, we use them for warehousing logistic projects now. We use them for all different types of commercial applications. We use them for recreation facilities, field houses for football fields.
I saw that. That was something that blew my mind. I'm not going to lie. That I did see that on your website, and I was like, I sat there and I thought, look, I'm not a pre-engineering or prefab expert. I understand the concept of it, work in construction. Some clients do it. But I was like, I always knew like you say, the warehousing, the industrial side, agriculture, of course, right? In the UK, we just call them sheds, right? So it's the same, right? And ultimately, I looked and I was like, that looks like a training, like a practice training for. And I was like, wow. And you sit there and think to yourself, of course, because the advancements that are obviously coming within the technology behind it are taking it to whole new markets, right? And is that, I see that you've obviously got, I see like universities and stuff and schools that are using it for various different things. What would you say is the area that's the kind of exploded within this area? Because like you say, you've got the agriculture and stuff that have used it forever. Yeah. What's the markets that you see that are either have exploded and happened now, or future uses that you think that would be good for the prefab, pre-engineering?
Yeah, I would say that they're definitely utilized a lot now for those types of field houses and recreation facilities, whether it's an ice arena or a football practice field, indoor football practice field. I still think they are, it's kind of it's growing even more just based on the market out there, but it's like warehousing logistics market, right? So that's obviously a huge growth sector in the U.S. and everywhere. So that continues to be very strong and a market that they're used in quite frequently. Looking forward and where are they used kind of creatively now, and where can they be used creatively moving forward? They really are advanced to the point that anything you can do 2 stories or less with conventional construction, you can do with a pre-engineered metal building. We have buildings out there that I talked before about having a single source provider, and we typically do provide the roof system, the wall system, and the framing system. But there's projects that we've done out there where we've just done the framing and the roof system, and then the walls are a completely different product. And we have some projects that if you looked at it from the outside, you wouldn't have any clue that it's a pre-engineered metal building. So I think being more creative with the way that the systems are utilized, there really is no limit to it. So where exactly it's going, I can't tell you, but I know that they're used more and more frequently. And as architects and engineers learn more about the systems, they're getting more comfortable designing their buildings utilizing pre-engineered metal buildings, because they realize the benefits of doing so.
Funny enough, I had somebody on from I don't know if you know a company called Rogers Construction in the Carolinas.
Mm-mm.
They get very much they're a very substantial. I think they're about $1 billion. They get involved in various different markets, but one of their key markets is the healthcare sector. So
Okay.
hospitals and everything else. And he actually, the guy who runs that side, a guy called Steve, he actually told us about a project that they got involved with where they did like almost dropping in some kind of prefab stuff around it
Yep.
on a live site, and it was just like the complexities of having to do that in a live hospital was incredible. I mean, obviously, traditional construction is always going to be a pain in the ass doing that in a hospital anyway. But dropping in lots of different prefab, and putting another level on top of a live accident and emergency speak, I was like, it blew my mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
What
There's a lot. There's been a lot of advancements. You can do a lot of different things with them now.
what would you say is the most complicated project you guys do? Because obviously, look, the whole point, I guess, of pre-engineered and prefab, and I'll ask you the difference in a moment so you can explain, because I wouldn't have a clue. Is ultimately, I guess, like what's the most complex project that you've done where you look at it and you think, like, look, as I said, it's supposed to be a bit more simple, but what's the most complex project that you've done where you sit there thinking to yourself, if they did this with a traditional construction, it would probably be even harder? Is there something you've looked at and gone, how have we even got this done?
Yeah. I mean, there's a couple that come to mind. There's a couple that come to mind. One we just completed this past year, which was complicated. You could do it with conventional construction, but it made sense for this client to utilize a pre-engineered metal building. We did a project for Lindy Engineering Americas. So they were building a new hydrogen facility up in Niagara Falls, and they wanted to utilize the pre-engineered metal building to do that, which that part of it was easy. It was 75 by 150, building, 150-foot long building, very simple building. That part was easy. The part that was difficult is that they had a tremendous amount of process piping and, just different piping and cable tray needs inside and outside the building. So we incorporated all that into the pre-engineered metal building design, and we provided all the pipe supports. They were suspended from the rafters of the metal building system. We provided all the cable trays on the inside and outside of the building. So there was a ton of supplemental steel that went into the building. I mean, there was almost as much tonnage as the actual building was. There was steel tonnage for the supplemental steel, and it was very complex. It was working in a model setting with a lot of different trades for a long time, and that was very, very challenging. But we were able to do it, and I think even the guys in the field, when we got out there and they saw the drawings, they're like, why are we doing this with a pre-engineered metal building? Like, what are we doing here? And they all doubted it, and they didn't think it could be done, and they didn't think the metal building could support those types of loads. But it did. I mean, like I said before, you can do anything with a pre-engineered metal building that you can do with a conventional construction up to two stories or less, really. And you can do more stories than that. It just starts to not make sense at all. But yeah, I mean, that was a very challenging project. There was a lot of parties in play there, and we were able to make it work. We really kind of pushed the envelope on a metal building in that regard. But from an appearance from the outside, looked like a regular metal building. You just had a bunch of steel sticking out of the side of the building that was supporting electrical cable tray. But it was a traditional metal building in appearance. Another one that sticks out as something. There's actually two that stick out as something that folks would look at it and not have a clue that they're a metal building. We did a project for Niagara University, which is a university right here in Lewiston, New York, and we did a project. It was called the Clay Hall project there. And when you look at that building from the outside, it had to fit in with the overall campus. And the overall campus was like stone, right? So, you couldn't use metal siding on that project. No matter what type of finish that we selected, it wasn't going to fit in with the overall campus. So that building, we utilized, clear span mainframes. We utilized a roof deck system that actually incorporated a roof deck on top, and then there was a soffit system underneath it. And that actually, instead of having like roof secondary members or roof purlins in the building, that deck actually was welded right to the frames. So it was very unique. And so that was the roof structure, and then the walls we incorporated support, but they installed cultured stone essentially on the exterior of the building. So when you look at the outside of the building, you would have no clue that's a pre-engineered metal building. And when you're inside the building, you would have no clue because it's entirely built out. You can see the soffit system, which is a metal perforated aluminum soffit system. But then all the columns and all the rafters are wrapped in drywall or different finishes. So it's really a unique building. I was at a event there about a month back, and with somebody with our company, with Montante, I should say. I was like, we built this building. They're like, this is a pre-engineered metal building. I'm like, yeah, this is a pre-engineered metal building. So you can use it a lot of different ways if you get creative. So those are a few. And then there was one other one we did up in Lewiston for a client of ours, called the name of their company is WTS. They were putting an indoor tennis facility on their campus for employee use, but they also donated a lot of the space and donated it back to the village to allow them to use it in the winter months. Same thing. That building from the outside doesn't look anything like a pre-engineered metal building, and both of those buildings in particular that look unique. They've all won awards, whether it's with our building manufacturer or Metal Construction News, just because they are unique in appearance, and they're just innovative ways to use metal buildings.
Well, that is something, like you say, because getting a metal building effectively that doesn't look like one. When somebody says to you, pre-engineer, the first thing that comes to mind is the just simple industrial shed, right? The big, massive kind of farm, agricultural style thing. So to completely change that and turn it into something, that doesn't look like that from the outside, I guess we have some design issues and certain complications. What's the difference between prefabricated and pre-engineered?
So prefabricated is, it's similar to pre-engineered. Prefabricated, more or less, the way I think about it is that is fabricated and assembled off-site. Where you think of like prefabricated, there's a lot of prefab manufacturers out there which will construct, whether it's spaces inside of a facility, or shelters for outside the facility, electrical houses. They will ship that already assembled. So it may come in a few different pieces that you like 3 or 4 different sections that you have to put together on site. But it's more fabricated off site in a factory. With pre-engineered, you still are assembling it in the field. The components all come individual, and you have to erect it in the field. Like I said, it's like a big erector set is essentially what you have here with a pre-engineered metal building. So that's the biggest difference. Prefabricated, I think of like kind of more module construction, and you're gonna get a finished product that's gonna arrive on your site.
Almost like I saw the Chinese put up I think it was a hotel or something like inside a day, and you're sitting there going, what? Modular buildings have been around for a long time, and the advancements have obviously been crazy over the last few years. But you look and you're like, you built that in a day. It's insane, right? Obviously, of course, it's put together in a day. It's taken God knows how long to actually fabricate it on site. So it makes sense actually exactly what you said. The difference between the two.
And we don't we have supplied a few prefab buildings over the years. for specific clients as part of a larger project. We don't specifically work in that market, but it makes a lot of sense because you can, especially for those buildings, like sometimes they're control buildings for the plant we did up in Niagara Falls for Lindy. We didn't provide it, but there was a prefab building that was used as kind of like the control center and like the brains of the entire operation. And when you can do all that work in a controlled environment in a factory, it really the quality control goes and quality assurance is improved. So there's a reason people do it, and it does make a lot of sense. Like I said, we don't work in that market, but it is a growing market, and I think the market will grow even further just as you know the labor pool is shrinking out there. I think more and more folks are looking at ways to do things in a modular way.
Well, I guess with AI and the technology that's going there, it's much, the complexities and the issues that people have on site, to, like you say, in a controlled environment inside with the technology that's now available and the skill shortage, it's
Yeah,
going to push it that way, right? What,
yeah,
what would you say
100%.
is one of the kind of or something that people still misunderstand about the pre-engineered metal building systems and the level of complexity involved? Certainly, I guess delivering them at scale.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the big misconceptions still is like you mentioned, most people think of them just as like a gabled building out in the middle of a field or on a site, an industrial site, a manufacturing site. Um, and don't get me wrong, we still do those buildings all the time. That still is a big part of our business, and anybody that's in pre-engineered metal buildings, that's a big part of your business. But they can be used for a lot of different applications. I think that is still misunderstood. The other thing that I think is misunderstood is as they're growing in popularity, I think sometimes designers don't fully understand them, and they think that a pre-engineered metal building manufacturer can be the quote unquote engineer of record for the project, which is not the case. So essentially, what a pre-engineered metal building manufacturer is doing is they're providing you with an engineered product, right? So they're taking the design loads and codes, designing their structure to meet those codes. But what they can't do is they can't tell you what those loads and codes have to be, right? That still has to come from the engineer of record. So that is something that comes up quite a bit when we're dealing with folks. They'll say, "Well, the pre-engineered metal building guy, that's the you guys are the structural engineer for the project," and that's not the case. That's not the case. We're providing an engineered product, but somebody still needs to provide us with those loads. Now, we typically know what they should be because when you do the
Right.
same when you do so many and you do so many in certain areas, you know what the loads are, and there's software out there that you can utilize to determine the loads in that area, but it ultimately needs to be verified by a structural engineer. So that's misunderstood still. Another thing that's misunderstood, I think a lot of general contractors, because we still work for general contractors a lot, right? We're a subcontractor just doing the pre-engineered metal building for larger contractors. We do that all the time. I think sometimes they still view the pre-engineered metal building manufacturer as another subcontractor. And sometimes they may think that it's very easy to order a metal building, and it can be. I mean, if you know what you're doing, it's not a super complex process, but you have to know what you're doing. And over the years, I've had general contractors try to go into the business, essentially go into our business, and buy buildings direct from the manufacturer. And one of the things they quickly learn is that you can't treat a metal building manufacturer as another subcontractor, right? So you can send them drawings and specs and tell them to give you an estimate and proposal for the project. Some of them will do that. Some of them want you to actually tell them exactly what you want. But either way, when you go to order the building, you can't just give them a subcontract. You have to sign their purchase order, right? So when you sign their purchase order, you're essentially telling them you're taking responsibility for everything in that order. If you have a specific roof or specific design loads figured in that building, that's your responsibility. So they're not responsible for any of that. So I think folks still think that it's easy just to order a metal building, and the responsibility, and they don't understand fully how much responsibility we have to take on when we do a project. And, it's something that we've come across over the years. And, a contractor may try to do it for a project or two, and then they might realize it's not worth it for them. And then we're doing work for them again. So that still comes up a lot.
Isn't that the way? I think that's always the way with GCs. There's always that, try and take certain things in house before they realise that there's certain expertise that need to be done on it.
Yeah.
You can imagine them sitting around a table going, "Oh, yeah, this is easy. If we just order it and put it together, it's not a problem." And then once they sit there, they've got it up and they think, "That doesn't look right." I'm not sure that looks right.
Yeah.
All in the specialists. And funny enough, my sister-in-law is a structural engineer, and for a large consultancy, international consultancy, and she always talks about this kind of stuff where like they're doing massive. I don't know if in the UK they're doing Crossrail, basically not Crossrail, HS2, the large business. It's a massive rail network project, and she always keeps coming back with these these queries and stuff previously where people would be like, thinking that the structural parts of it are really simple. Well, that's easy. It's just going over, a bridge or whatever it will be. And she's like, I guess you're constantly coming up against that where you've got that traditional construction outlook of it as well. This is just as simple. It's easy. It just needs to go over. And it's like, well, hold on. There's a lot more complexities to this than you actually think. So
there's always a lot more that goes into it.
I did that some renovations in the house. I was looking for a wall, and I was just like, why can't you just kind of put the steels into the ceiling and into the walls? And the structural engineer's looking at me like, are you stupid? And I was just like, yes, I guess I am. You do that, and it's like, no, you can't. The floorboards go the wrong way. And it's just like, it's funny when you don't know it, you just look, why can't these things be simple? But then they never are.
It's funny. There was a conversation. I was in a meeting about a month ago. We were going after a project with Montante. So Montante was trying to be the general contractor for it, and we were meeting with the client, and they brought me in because it was going to be a pre-engineered metal building, so they wanted me in their room as well. And something came up related to the HVAC system, and they were all like talking, and I like made a suggestion, and they all looked at me like, just stick to the metal building, man. Just stick to it. Was whatever. I forget what it was. I forget what my actual suggestion was. But then after I'm like, yeah, I just stick to what I know. And then we just started, it was funny that even the client was laughing. He's like, yeah, just stick to metal building.
Yeah, man. So just look past you to the HVAC specialist and go, what's he talking about?
Yeah, it was comical, but it's like anything else. You think everything, you think what other people do is easy, but there's a lot that you got to realize there's a lot that goes into
it. Funny, as you were saying it, I play it out of my mind and see it, and you think to yourself, that's a comedy sketch right there in construction.
Oh yeah, it was comical.
I love it. Something I was going to ask, right? Because naturally, obviously, after the acquisition and whatnot, you obviously work for the business that carries your family name, right? So how do you kind of balance tradition with innovation, but in a larger kind of structure?
Yeah. I think one of the things that I always go back to is I just always focus on what, my father and grandfather taught me when I first came into the business, that, your reputation is everything. Having integrity is everything. And just having a very important focus on the client. I try to do that every day, and the folks that work with me here, I try to instill in them that's the most important thing in our business. So staying kind of grounded in that, I try to stay grounded in that while also understanding that, we have to evolve. Our company evolved prior to coming over and being a part of Montante, and it's continued to evolve since then as the market's evolved, right? So when just an example, when I first got in the business, we only partnered with one metal building manufacturer. That was kind of the way for years and years. Most folks would have one building manufacturer, and we were very, very loyal to our manufacturer. But as in the I'll call it 2015 and on, from that time, we realized that there was some limitations to doing that, and we branched out and started partnering with different manufacturers. That was like when we made that move, even my grandfather was like, "What are we doing? We've been with this company for 35 years. Like we can't shop around and use other manufacturers." But once we kind of discussed it and realized, look, we're not just shopping around. We're not trying to get like the best price on every project. That's not why we're doing it. We're doing it because we need to have some diversification, and our suppliers need to be diversified, for not only price but like schedule, right? And so we made that change, and that was huge for us going into and coming out of COVID. Like if we were still with just that one manufacturer that we were with for years and years, we would have probably went out of business just because they had some specific issues during that time that pushed everybody's lead times were crazy, but theirs were very bad. And if we would have just stayed with those guys, we would have probably not been able to kind of weather the storm during coming out of COVID. So I think it's staying grounded in those values, but also looking for ways to change, innovate, and stay current with the market. I think are super important. Um, if we don't do that, if we don't change, if we don't see what other, um, what needs our clients have that are evolving, if we don't do that, we'll be out of, we'll be out of business in a period of time. So we can never stay stagnant. So we're always looking into new technologies, looking into new ways of doing things. We're always trying to stay kind of at the forefront of the industry.
No, it makes complete sense. Like you say, I think kind of being stuck with one particular supply can always stranglehold your business, right? And as soon as there's a bottleneck somewhere, you're going to feel it as well. A question I was going to ask, right? Have you guys been affected by the whole tariff and war issues that have been going on with
Mhm.
Canadian steel situation? Because again, that you'll tell me, and you obviously know much more than I do, but from what I researched and know about, that the US is obviously quite heavily reliant on Canadian steel,
Mhm.
or a certain period. A lot of it is, not
Yeah.
all. There's others. Being as close as you are to the border, is that? Do you use Canadian steel? Has it been something that's kind of affected your business, or?
That hasn't really affected, specifically Canadian steel hasn't affected our business that much. I mean, one of our providers, they're an Australian steel company, so they get their steel comes from overseas. The other one of our main suppliers is a U.S. based company, so we haven't been as affected as most. That being said, um, one of one of the things that people I think look past with tariffs is, even that foreign steel that's going to be subject to the tariffs that are coming in. That there's going to be an increase in price associated with that in the way of the tariff. But these U.S. based companies, they are in business for profit, and they know that their competition, because there's not as many U.S. based steel suppliers out there. They understand that their competition is going to be their prices are going to be higher because when you factor in the tariffs. So they raise their prices as well. So yeah, I mean, it has affected us overall. So like, let's say the tariff is going to be, we hear it's going to be 20 or 30%. The U.S. suppliers are still raising their prices because they know, one, they can still raise their prices and
Active audience.
sell. Yeah, they have a captive audience. So also like their demand's going to go up. So they're gonna have to produce more product. So it definitely has had an effect. Um, Really since the first of the year, prices have gone up. It's not as crazy as it was. Like there was a period in 2021 where pricing just skyrocketed coming out of COVID. I mean, it was going up. I mean, it was doubled, from like May to August in a year, the price like doubled. So that was very hard to navigate, and prices were not being held very long by the suppliers. So that was a challenge. We're not seeing anything like that, but we have definitely seen an increase in pricing. Um, I'd say 20% plus or minus.
Wow. Well, we've seen something recently, the whole UK-US trade deal, and I'm pretty sure there's no doubt political influence in that, UK steel was saved after in and around those conversations with
Mhm.
between the Trump administration and the UK Prime Minister here. So all of a sudden I'm sitting and this trade deal has now been agreed, and you sit there thinking, right, it looks like suddenly we're going to be supplying some steel across to the States as well, but in return accepting beef. So it's opened up. It's opened up. But hey
Yeah.
ho, large steaks that you guys eat, I'm sure we're going to see a few of those on our plate soon.
Yeah. Yeah.
Something I was going to ask as well is that, look, naturally, you approach your business right through growth and innovation, like you said. Things change from when your grandfather was there with training, etc. What's changed when you bring people in that don't really know much about either the pre-engineering side, or they're kind of new to your business? Do you have a more like a rigorous training structure now to kind of bring those people through?
We do have some training that we put in place. A lot of that, when I came over here as a part of Montante, they asked me to put together training for their company overall, because you know a handful of people fully understood what we did and understood our business, but there's probably 100 people that didn't have a clue what we were even providing. So we did a lot of that internally here, and we captured some of those trainings where we can kind of do them on demand for new folks as they come in, which has been good. When and that's good for general knowledge within the overall company. But when folks work specifically with me and specifically in our division, there is that training aspect of it. We will send them out to do some training off site with some other folks as it makes sense. But it still is. I'm probably not as innovative as I should be in this regard, but I still do a lot of that same types of hands-on training that my dad and grandfather did with me, where it's really, you know, based on going to the site, riding shotgun for a little bit, and really understanding the business. Um, and that's never been something. So when I bringing new people onto our division, so we've brought in new folks. Some of the folks that were at Montante, we brought over to work with us exclusively. Um, and that part of it, I feel like teaching them pre-engineered metal buildings, I can do. I can do that. Um, it's really about the thing I can't train somebody on is how to be honest and how to be a hard worker. That's the part that's hard to train. So, I really look for that more than anything else. And then if it's just specific technical knowledge, I can train them on that. I mean, pre-engineered metal buildings, it's not rocket science. It's just that most people don't specialize in it, and most people don't spend a lot of time in their career doing it. It's very hard to find folks that have pre-engineered metal building experience. Like in our market here, there's maybe only a couple other companies that do them. So if I have to hire a project manager, it's very unlikely I'm going to find somebody with a tremendous amount of pre-engineered metal building experience.
Hmm. I was going to reach onto that, right? Because it is a more niche area within within this construction space. So when you are recruiting, what challenges do you face when you're kind of looking for people that have got that technical competency in what you do? Is there kind of struggles that you find struggles you face to find those people, or do you look at other areas of construction to bring them in from?
Yeah, we typically look for other areas of construction and see like if they had something like maybe if we're going to hire a project manager, it would be nice to know that they haven't done what I do in terms of pre-engineered metal buildings, but they've worked on projects where they've been a part of the job. Like a pre-engineered metal building was a part of the project. Maybe they're from a larger general contractor or GC background, and they worked on 3 projects that had metal buildings on them over their career. That's a good starting point where they at least know some of the terminology and understand some basics of the building system. So we do look for that. We hope that they have some experience. Um, you know, Other than that, it's hard to really say that there's a very good like skill set that like specifically like transfers over. Like if there's not like a ton of people out there that have pre-engineered metal building experience. It's not like guys that have concrete experience where there's a ton of them out there. Um, So yeah, I mean, we like to see that they've had some experience with pre-engineered metal buildings, but on the project management side, we can kind of train them up pretty quickly. Where there's a little bit more of a lag in that training process is on the front end and like the design and estimating side of things. Because project management at the end of the day, the principles of project management kind of kind of, work across the board where, understanding metal building design is a little bit harder. Um, and that's something that takes a little longer to develop. Having folks that have some sort of background in, you know, um, computer, CAD or something like that is helpful for that side of things. Also, we have had some success with, working with folks that have backgrounds in kind of similar industries where it's maybe not prefab building, but here, on the U.S., we call them pole barns or post frame buildings where it's wood infrastructure. If they have a little bit of experience in that, that transfers over pretty good to pre-engineered metal buildings.
Yeah, I guess like you say, it's that transferable skill, right? It's the same
Yeah.
concept that you're delivering. It's just a different material. I'm sure
Yeah.
there are some differences, but it can't be that different as like you said, bring somebody in from a drywall background. It's never going to be the same, right? So I take it then. So from going from that, rather than technical competency, you would probably take somebody that's got the right sort of attitude and desire to apply themselves. Would that be fair to say?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the key project managers that works with me every day, her name is Jasmine, and she is excellent, right? She had never even worked on a pre-engineered metal building before she started working with me, but she um, had a desire and a deep desire to learn, and she is an incredibly hard worker, and she commits 100% of herself to the job. And she's learned a lot about metal buildings over the past 3 years that her and I have been working together. Um, and she does a lot of things well that I don't do well, where so we work hand in hand a lot. So she is somebody who had absolutely no experience in pre-engineered metal buildings, but had a good construction experience. And she has proven to be, a very, very key part of our team here. Just by bringing over those project management skills that she had. She does a really, really good job staying on top of things, incredibly organized, and keeps me in check as well.
Yeah, I think you always got to have one of those in the team that keeps you in check. Otherwise, you
Oh
find
yeah. So
yeah.
I definitely lean more on that side of things, for sure.
Well, it makes sense. I've always found that hiring for my own business, that gut feel. When you get somebody that's really got the hunger and tenacity to want to be able to kind of apply themselves and do well, it
Yeah.
doesn't matter what you do. I mean, yes, of course. Look, if you're a heart surgeon, of course, you're going to need to make sure that you've done 7 years of medical school and
Yeah.
you've done many surgeries before you kind of do it on a live patient, right? But in what we do, it's again, it's not rocket science. It's not difficult. It's much less difficult than putting together a steel building. I'll tell you that. But it's something that if you're good at it, it's because you apply yourself and you're a person. You think a little bit outside of the box. So yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think finding somebody that really kind of wants to push themselves and do well I found from all the different construction elements that I've ever worked in and recruited for, that's, I would say, probably about 85% of the time what leadership want, because you can teach somebody, right? You're the experts, you can teach them that. But if you've got somebody who's an expert that doesn't turn up to work, or they love a drink, or they're a pain in the ass, then
Yeah.
what are you going to do with that?
Yeah. I also find that we've kind of always taken that approach. Even before I was over here, my father and grandfather always took the approach that we liked taking that approach and finding somebody that was really eager to learn, that maybe didn't have a lot of experience, maybe they were younger as well, and really kind of teaching them the business the way we did the business. Not to say that we did it 100% correct or the right way, but we wanted to teach them our way. Where there are times when you get somebody that maybe has a ton of technical experience, um, maybe doesn't have great intangibles, and maybe they're not open to learning. Or I mean, they might be 3 times as smart as me, but if they're not open to learning and doing things differently, like that's only going to take them so far. That technical experience and that technical knowledge is only going to take them so far.
Yeah, I can agree with you more. In terms of, I guess, your kind of recruitment strategy, then, do you look for people that are maybe more young and hungry that you can assist and train, um, or do you look for people that have got levels of experience from GC that you can kind of shape up faster, or is it a bit of a balanced approach?
Yeah, it's a bit of a balance, and you have to balance needs of your own business too. Like in a perfect world, I would prefer to bring folks on that were younger and we can kind of teach them the business and bring them through that way. But there's times when, you get a certain level of work where you need to have that experience. You need to have somebody with an experience level that can come in and kind of run a project right away. So you need to have a little bit of both, I find. You know, there's really there really is no substitute for that experience. So somebody that's like a 20 or 30-year vet, and I have a project that I'm not going to be able to be involved in, and we need to have somebody run it well for us. I would definitely look towards experience versus trying to bring somebody up in a short period of time to try to have them run that. So it's a balance. It's a balance.
No, I can imagine that makes complete sense. Something that came up during research, so that you guys are ranked in the top 50 of nationwide pre-engineered metal building steel tonnage and square footage sold.
Mhm.
That's crazy. What milestones or moments kind of stand out for you as your kind of or any of those moments career defining? Do you look for accolades? Do those things that you kind of pay attention to, or are they just happening in the background?
Um, those specific things kind of happen a bit in the background. I mean, there's a lot of good contractors in the U.S. that are on that list. There's a ton of them. There's companies that have been on that list. Like we've been on it for a long time, but there's companies that have been on that list since they started creating the list. And they've been at the top for 30 years. There's companies that have been in the top one or two every year for the past 30 years. So there's some really good companies out there. Um, you know, I don't think about those kind of milestones. I think about like there are some projects that have kind of marked transition in our business. I found, when I joined the company in 2009 full time, we had just started a project for the Hamburg Fairgrounds gaming building here in town, and that was kind of like a defining moment for our company. We had before that we'd always done work all over Western New York, but we had done much more in Niagara County, which is north of Erie County. We had done a little bit of smaller projects. We didn't do a project on that scale in some time, and we did that project with LP Simonelli, which was uh, you know they were one of the top general contractors in Western New York and even New York State. So landing that project, that was a big milestone for us. Delivering that project successfully was a big milestone. It kind of showed what we could do. And from that project, we went on to do, over the next 10 years, we probably did a project every year with Simonelli. So that was big for us. That was really big for the company. The other one that I think was important and kind of showed our level of growth and showed what we could do is that field house project we did for the University of Buffalo. We started that in 2018, and that was a very high profile project, little under 100,000 square feet, um, unique building, some unique finishes on the exterior. Um, Building was tall. You can kick a field goal in there, but you can't punt. They say because it's not high enough to punt, but you can kick a field goal in there. That was big because of the high profile nature of the project. I remember when that project came out for bid. I talking to my dad. I'm like, we got to be on this job. It's probably going to be the biggest pre-engineered metal building or highest profile pre-engineered metal building that's happening right now and will be for a few years. Like we have to do this one. So we worked at that really hard to win that job, and then on the actual construction. So that was kind of defining because I'll still be in meetings now with folks, and I'll bring up that project, and they'll be like, "You built that?" And I'm like, "Yeah, we built that project." So it does lend a lot of credibility to your business when people see that you can do these larger scale projects and can execute them successfully.
Make
So I
sure
would
you
say
bring that
like
up. Yeah.
the
Make sure
projects
you.
are. Oh, I'm
Sorry,
sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, make sure you bring that up the next time you're in the same room with the client where you mentioned the HVAC.
HVAC, yeah, I'll make sure I'll bring that up next time. Try to get some credibility back there. for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
Look, obviously, look, you come across as a really nice and relaxed guy, right? What kind of internal culture do you kind of try to build or preserve as you scale your business within the kind of Montante business group?
I mean, that's kind of my approach to business in general. Urgency for the client is important always, so we do want to instill that, but at the end of the day, we can't take ourselves that seriously, right? It's not as serious as some people think. I think having that casual approach is important. It keeps folks relaxed within the business. Um, you know, it allows people to understand and being approachable, having other people in our division be approachable, I think is um very important to me. Um also, it's I've always kind of had and this was instilled in me by my father and grandfather as well, like, um you got to worry about money, but like if something can be fixed and it costs some money to do it, don't lose weeks of sleep over it. You got to be, you're a for-profit company, you got to make money, but at the end of the day, if you can fix something, and maybe it costs you a little money, um, not that big of a deal at the end of the day. So that's kind of our approach, is kind of having a relaxed approach to the business, but with that, balancing the fact that we do have to have a sense of urgency and commitment 100% to the client.
No, no, that makes complete sense. It makes complete sense because I think, I believe that there's, that goes a saying, you attract more bees with honey than you do with vinegar, right? And I think anybody could be an arsehole on any given day.
Oh yeah.
That's fair
Yep.
enough. But I think if you work with an arsehole all day, every day,
Yep.
you're not going to be approachable. You're going to find out late about problems when they're gone from molehills to mountains, and
Yep.
I think it's a good approach to have. I think because being approachable, sometimes it can be a pain in the ass as well, where people are constantly knocking on your door asking
Yep.
questions.
Yep.
But
Yeah.
the
It's
upside,
funny you say that. It's funny you say that you attract more bees with honey, because I've always felt the same way. Like, my approach to like leadership, or if you have to have a tough conversation with a client, or not a client, with a coworker, or another contractor, or you have to express that you know a way that something happened is not acceptable. I think finding a way to always navigate that conversation, and have that person, that coworker, that contractor, kind of come to the realization themselves, and also feel bad that they did that in a certain respect, or kind of feel like they let you down. I think there's a lot more power in that than, or they let themselves down, I should say. I think there's a lot more power in that than just being a disciplinarian. I
yeah,
think I think people don't respond to that. I think, I don't want to say anything controversial, but younger generations respond to that even less. I respond to that less than my father did, and generation that's in the business now that's younger than me, they respond to that even less than I did. That mentality doesn't work, the way that my grandfather may have dealt with people.
in the face.
He, yeah, he was always, what though, it's funny because he came from a generation. He started his business in 1973, and it was a much different business back then. Um, there was a lot more yelling and screaming on job sites back then, but
Imagine.
everybody I've ever interacted with, and I think this is what led to his success, is everybody I've ever interacted with that worked with him or worked for him as a subcontractor or a client, they just liked him. They just liked working with him. They thought he was a fair guy, even if something went bad on a job site with a subcontractor, they always worked it out, and he kind of met people in the middle, and that's kind of been my approach throughout. Is that that's what you have to do sometimes. And but yeah, so he definitely had a different way of doing things than we do now, but he was definitely somebody that everybody enjoyed working with.
Yeah, like I say, the general kind of ethos is probably the same, right? The,
Yeah.
the the way the way you go about it was probably a little bit different, a bit slamming and kicking and shouting
Yeah.
and screaming as goes the just the way of the times, right? It's just the way it
Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
Obviously, I see that you're obviously a father, you're a coach, and you're someone that you value time outdoors. How do you
Mhm.
balance leadership with everything else that matters to you?
Time management's important, right? So time management is very important. A lot of the stuff that I do for myself, whether it's exercising, getting outside, things like that, I try to do that early during the day. I do that before I come to work, which is good because one, I'm taking care of those tasks and taking care of my physical and mental health is important. But also it kind of like sets you up for the day, I find. But in terms of balancing the priorities, um, when I was in my 20s and even early 30s, when I was married and then my kids were young, I worked a lot, especially before we came over here in 2021. But even before then, I worked a ton and I enjoyed it. Like I enjoyed working a lot. I was building the business. I was working on the business. I really loved it, but I mean, it would, 60, 70, even some 80-hour weeks was not unheard of. Um, and I did that for a long time. And like I said, even when I got married, I did it. My wife understood it. She understood it. She was on board with it. And then when my kids were young, I did it. But then there was kind of like an aha moment. I remember standing in my kitchen one day and I was leaving on a set because I always worked Saturday. I always worked on Saturday because nobody else was there and it was great. I used to get a ton done. And I remember my oldest son was like 4, I think, at the time, and he was like upset that I was leaving, and I'm like, what do you want me to do? And then my wife was like, well, he's older now. He knows you're not here. Like he's not 2 years old anymore. He knows you're not here. He's wondering what's going on. And that like kind of like it kind of planted the seed that maybe I needed to make some changes. Um, so I started to do that, and now I have a very balanced approach to things. I feel like there's even though I worked a lot during that time, family was always priority number one, and it 100% is today. And now my kids are a little bit older now. My oldest is 10. Um, my daughter is she's about to turn 9, and my youngest just turned 7. So they're older now, and I'm making it a point to try to soak up all that time with them because I know before I realize that they'll be out of the house,
Yeah.
and I won't be able to get that time back. I will not, it's gone once they're gone. I mean, your kids, when they're born, you might have 18 years with them in the house together, where it's the way it is right now. So I'm really trying to soak that up, and I know like my son, he's gonna be 11 in November. He's probably got about a year or two before he doesn't want to hang out with me anymore. Like right now, I'm the guy, and all the kids want to hang out with me and my wife. But in a couple of years, when they're in middle school, that's not going to be the case anymore. So just trying to remember to soak that up, and it's yeah, it's work life balance and it's balancing priorities. But it's learning to make it work, right? So like if my kid has something during the day, I may leave work for 2 hours to go do that,
Yeah.
but I got to work on Saturday that week to balance it out, or I got to put in a few hours on Sunday that week just to make it work. It's just I focus on what my priorities are, which number one, like I said, is the family. And as long as I'm taking care of everything, um, not getting super critical of exactly how it looks. Like, it's hard to be a coach, be a father, be in business, and try to have everything fit in a box. Like if I came to the office every day at 8 and wanted to be done at 4 every day and just have that perfect schedule and then go home at night and then turn it on. It doesn't really work when you're trying to integrate that many different things. So you got to have kind of a flexible approach. And again, just remember what is important to you and just make sure you're taking care of those things on a daily and weekly and monthly basis.
I can agree more. I've got 3 kids, and my oldest is just coming 7. I've got 3 boys, and I'm now actually in the start of that. That dad's the guy who wants to hang around.
Oh yeah.
You're in that shape now where you're starting to shape his behaviour. And my wife always said to me, you got to be careful here because you're shaping his behaviour. So, all right, yeah, I forgot now. He's not.
Yeah.
He's not so small that he doesn't remember what I'm saying or what I'm doing. We'd
Yep.
be driving in the car somewhere, and he'd be like, "What are you two talking about?" And you're like, "I forgot you're here," And
Yep.
he's on that thing. So it's amazing how quickly it goes, right? How fast that goes. I've got my youngest is 18 months, and I mean, honestly, that's gone like that.
Oh
It's
yeah.
running around and he's nearly talking and he's shouting at me and pointing at things. And
Yeah.
funny enough, earlier on, my wife was here and the baby come back, I think, after the school drop. So I always work at home on a Thursday. And she said to me, she said, Jamie, come here, look at this. And I was like, what? I went out the door, popped in and I looked down and he's sitting there. He's turned on Netflix on the TV. He's 18 months old. He's sitting there.
Oh my God.
I'm
Yeah.
like, what is going on here? It's crazy, like how
That's
far,
great.
right?
It's fast, and you know what? They learn fast. I mean, the kids, especially like after the first one learns fast, then the second and third, they see the older one,
Yeah, I
they
was
see the
gonna say,
older one just accelerates. You're like, what is going on here? But it's great. Yeah, I've had, I remember some of those early times when I'm like, oh, he just heard me there. He remembered what I said right there. So you
I'll tell
definitely
you,
got to
there's
be.
another story. Another one was great. I actually had a client of ours in, I think they were in South Carolina, and I went down to see my aunt and uncle, and they got a caravan. It's a really nice caravan on a site in Kent somewhere. It's part of what they do, love it. And went down there. So we're sitting there outside having a chat, and it was about, I don't know, about 11 o'clock in the morning here. So what's it? 5 o'clock in the morning or whatever it is, and all of a sudden I just heard hello, and I looked down, and my youngest has been pressing my Apple Watch, and he's rang the client. It's 5 o'clock in the
Oh
morning.
my God, that's great. That's
The
great.
first thing is, I hung up, and I never spoke to that client. It was a new client. We was just starting trying to get with. I never personally spoke to that client ever again. I
Oh my
handed
God,
it off to the guy that was actually managing the account. Never spoke to him ever again. If you're watching this, I apologise.
that's great.
It was crazy. But
That's great.
a couple more questions I've got for you before I let you go.
Yeah.
What do you see as kind of, okay? So look, if you're looking ahead at the industry, what would be something that you feel that if was changed, or things that you would change in the industry that would have, the biggest impacts? It's something I ask every single person. You know, if you had that magic wand, so to speak, if you could kind of just in an instant change one thing that's going to have the greatest impact, what do you think that would be?
I wouldn't say it's specific to the pre-engineered building industry specific. It's construction in general. It's just I think the biggest threat that we're up against in this business is just the shrinking labor pool. I think that is huge in our market specifically. That is enormous. There has been less and less folks going into the trades for a number of years just because they maybe don't understand how valuable or how rewarding of a career it could be and how viable of a career it could be for somebody. So you're having individuals that are, you're having less individual laborers or skilled tradespeople in the industry, but also companies are, like ours did, they're consolidating, and you're having labor consolidation in that regard as well. So I think um, diversification of labor, and then also just a growing workforce of young folks entering into the business, that would probably have the biggest impact on our business, whether it's pre-engineered metal buildings or commercial construction or residential construction in general, because it is such an aging workforce um, in the field, but also in the office as well. There's less and less folks getting into the industry, and it can be such a rewarding business. Like I mentioned, right when we started, like growing up, that's one of the things that stuck out to me was my family had such pride in like pointing out when they were driving around town, like, hey, yeah, we built that building, and we built that building, or I had a part in building that building. And when you talk to guys that are not even business owners, but guys that worked in the field for a number of years, they all have a deep sense of pride when they say, like, yeah, I worked on that project, I worked on that hotel project, I worked on that school. Um, so it's an incredibly rewarding career path. It can be incredibly, lucrative too. I mean, it's a well-paying job when you get started. You can get into it. You can get into it. You can get an apprenticeship right out of high school. You don't have to incur any college debt. You can start making money day one. I mean, it's really a good avenue for folks to take. And then there's always opportunities for upward mobility within companies. I mean, whether it's starting working as a skilled tradesman, then you become the foreman of your crew, then you work up and you're a superintendent. And then maybe you want to go into the office, you can be a project manager and estimator. Maybe you want to start your own business. There's so many options, and I just don't think people. I still think people don't give it the consideration it deserves, and I think that's a big threat to our industry. You know, I mean, the aging workforce, aging out of the business is a huge threat to our business.
Yeah, I think look, you're not the only person. I think every single person I've spoken to that I've had on the podcast so far, and clients that we speak to as well, I think it's the biggest concern because you know you've got that both ends of the spectrum, as you say. You've got an aging workforce where you're going to lose all of that experience and all of the knowledge that goes with that. They're not
Mhm.
passing that on to the younger generation because they're not coming through the door. So not only has you got the gap in the labor itself, but it's that expertise and that knowledge that's constantly being you know passed through the generations to get you to where you want to be, and that helps to speed up that I guess the knowledge bank and your expertise and experience. So yeah. Last question I've got for you. What does success look for you like over the both I guess professionally and personally over the next sort of 5-10 years?
Professionally, I mean, we want to in the next, call it, 5 years. I'd really like to. We're on a path where we want to double the size of our business. And I think we're in a good position to do that. We've maintained steady growth since we've been a part of Montante Construction, a division of their company. It's really helped foster our growth. I think we'll have to get a little more regional in our approach as we continue to grow. So it's growth, getting a little more regionally diversified, and working with more and more sophisticated clients, I'll say, or more corporate clients versus just working on a project for somebody in town. We still want to do that work. Those are the best relationships we have, is with local companies in town, but working with some national organizations. That kind of thing is huge when you get linked up with a national group where you can kind of that work can carry you throughout the region or even throughout the nation. I think that's important. So that would be success for us. Really, doubling our business, being more of a regional player, and working with different larger entities, more national entities would be huge for us. Um, Personally, it's just, continue to be. I don't have a lot of real specific goals. Just continue to be a good husband. Continue to be a good father, and really help my kids. 5 to 10 years, they're going to be starting their own kind of journeys in life, and just hoping to put them on the right path, and see them through that. So that's really it on the personal side. Just hopefully more of the same, and um, you know, that's pretty much it.
No, look, yeah, Justin, your story is great, and I'm pretty sure there's going to be a lot of people that listen to this and take a lot of value from it. So we really appreciate you coming on.
Appreciate you guys having me. It's been great.
Thanks very much.